Hello and welcome to Impact Africa, our online talk show where we get to have conversations with diverse people and organizations who are impacting lives positively. This is a special series where we celebrate Nigeria because of the Independence Day in October. And yes, this is your girl, Kemi Akiode Adebayo, Mama K. And with me today, wow, what a blessed day I'm having. I've got my brother who is an awesome, gentle, humble, hardworking, intelligent. I will go on and on. Mr. Atose Aguele. He is the managing director and CEO of Avedia Energies and Avedia Foods. And this is based in Cape Town, South Africa. My brother Atose.
Thank you.
How are you?
Very well.
Good. Thank you for honoring us and allowing us to be in your beautiful home.
You're very welcome.
Now, let's go way back. Where were you born? How was life growing up? What's family, education? Share with us.
Okay, so I was born more than 50 years ago.
More than, I like that.
I was born in a town called Bath in the UK.
Okay.
My parents were in university in the UK. My mother was at University of Bristol. My father had just finished in India and had arrived in the UK. So I was born there.
So you had a traveling parent. Finished in India, in UK, arrived. Oh, wow. I want to hear maybe some stories of a little bit of that. Okay, exactly. So born in Bath.
So I was born in Bath in 1963 and lived, returned back to Nigeria at about 2 years old. So
that was with your parents,
with
obviously.
My parents,
yes. Or were you sent home?
No. I wasn't one of those.
You were not one of those. Okay.
So we moved back to Nigeria.
Okay.
My parents had finished their education, and so I grew up. I would say my early childhood was in Lagos.
Okay.
I attended Corona School, Apapa, in the very early 70s.
Right.
And at that time, Lagos was a relatively small city. I would say it was still, of course, the largest city in Nigeria at that time. But I grew up in Apapa, very quiet neighborhood. I mean,
must
when you
have been at that time
to what you have now. So very neighborly community. And I finished in Corona in 1975. Okay. I proceeded to Federal Government College Ilorin, where I completed my high school, and then proceeded to the UK. Okay. To a town called Brighton, where I finished up my A-levels.
So did you make the decision at that time to go back to the UK yourself, or your parents said, no, now go back to the UK for your A-levels, or how did that happen?
I mean, at that time I was 15 years old, so
yes.
I wasn't making
the decision yourself
about my education for sure.
Yeah.
So I think it was my parents' decision.
Okay. Right.
For me to go back to the UK.
Okay.
And I was in the UK for 2 years, and then proceeded to America.
Okay. Wow, you've traveled there?
Yes, yes.
You don't work, as we say.
Absolutely.
So you went to America to study again?
Yes, to study, and I attended University of Delaware.
Right.
Where I finished my bachelor's degree.
And what did you study?
I studied agricultural economics.
Ah, interesting. Okay.
So, and at that time, there was the view, as you know, parents are quite influential in what we study. So I wasn't going to be a doctor or an engineer. So my parents thought, well, my father, we had very large farms at that time in Nigeria and Edo State.
Okay, so your parents are originally from Edo?
My dad is originally from Edo State.
Okay, where in Edo State specifically?
Ishan.
Ishan, okay.
So we had already large investments in farms.
Right.
So my dad thought it would be appropriate for me to become a farmer. And that's why.
And for you, was that a goal or a vision for you at that time?
Now I look back, it was, Daddy wants me to do this, so it was okay.
Right.
And so I studied agriculture, and then worked in the States for about 2 years to get some experience. As an undergraduate student, I met my wife, who you know quite well. She was also at the same university.
Right.
And at around, I always knew I was coming back to Nigeria. It was obviously, I always knew that going to school in the States was really about just getting an education and coming back. There was never a view of
staying
in the US.
No. Okay.
And so at around, I guess, 23, 24, I started making plans to come back to Nigeria. And I finally returned to Nigeria at age 26.
Okay.
1990, I came back. And
so you got married in the States at that time?
No, so at that time I wasn't married.
Okay.
So at that time we were engaged to be married.
Right. Okay.
My wife had my girlfriend at that time, or fiancé, as you call it.
And you recently celebrated your 29 years anniversary. Congratulations! Well done.
Thank you. Okay. And so she had applied to business school, and she'd been accepted at the Rutgers Business School. So she was the plan was to finish up, and then we get married, and then she comes back to Nigeria. So I went back ahead of her, basically. And at the time I got back, of course, as you know, there are normal policy changes constantly in Nigeria. And that had been a policy change in terms of agriculture. And the prospects for agriculture that we saw in the early 80s had changed in the early 90s. And specifically, the farms we had were poultry farms. And it had been devastated. The poultry industry had been devastated due to SAP, which was introduced, I think, in 1985. And so I had essentially two choices. What do I do? Do I go back? Do I continue on the agricultural route? Or do I join another family business, which is the gas business?
Right.
And I opted to join the gas business. And so in 1991, I started working for my dad's company, Granny Gas.
Okay.
And I was at Granny Gas till about 94, 95. And as usual, of course, young people always have a 0 to 100 in seconds. They want to do all of these things. Older people tend to be a bit more conservative.
Exactly.
And so I wanted to change the business quite dramatically.
I can imagine.
My father thought, we've done this for already 30 years and maybe we shouldn't be in a hurry.
If it ain't broken, don't fix it.
So I suggested that I start a trading company. Okay. And so I started Union Petroleum, which was an LPG, essentially an oil and gas trading company in 1995. Okay. And as luck would have it, I think, again, oftentimes it's desire meeting opportunity. And it was just an opportune time to start an oil and gas trading company in Nigeria at that time. And we were very successful very early on. And within 3 years, we bought our first vessel, first ship, LPG ship, a small LPG ship. And quite quickly, Union Petroleum became essentially the dominant player in the trading of LPG in Nigeria. So at the time, I would say, certainly in the late 90s, early 2000s, we were probably the preeminent gas company from a trading point of view in Nigeria. So I did that for a while. We also traded in other commodities. So we traded in not just gas, but in diesel and gasoline. By 2001, we'd had 2 kids. And I also, at that time, had visited South Africa for the first time.
Okay, I was just going to ask, how did you, with all these travels from Bath to Lagos, back to UK, to the US, how did you end up in South Africa?
So interestingly enough, South Africa was quite a, for those of us that grew up in the 70s and 80s, South Africa was a very topical issue. Apartheid, of course, was a burning issue at that time. And for young kids like us in the 70s, it was just unbelievable to actually hear of some of the issues at the time in South Africa. But we were already exposed to South African culture. So in 1976, as you know, there was 77.
Festac.
Festac 77. Festac 77, there was a Black Arts Festival.
Correct.
And there was a large contingent of South African.
Tell me, if you didn't know about all the Miriam Makeba and everybody at that time, Hugh Masekela, yes.
So certainly we enjoyed South African culture and also had some exchange students from South Africa. In Nigeria, but beyond that, I knew nothing about South Africa. Of course, Mandela was released in 1990, 94, there's an election. But South Africa there was quite a lot of violence in those early days. And so there wasn't really the enthusiasm to visit South Africa. But as you can see, art is a big part of our lives, my wife and I. And so in 2001, I had seen a program on art in South Africa. And so I decided, wow, this is quite interesting. Why don't I visit? At that time, my wife was in the States. We just had our second child, I think, in 2001. And so I visited South Africa alone in 2001. And instantly, I think, fell in love with South Africa.
I can imagine.
And I was in Joburg for about 3 days. At that time, of course, Joburg, and still is, quite a calm city, great infrastructure.
Still a kind of hustling and bustling compared to Cape Town.
Absolutely. But
so how did you end up in Cape Town from Joburg?
So the trip was to visit Johannesburg and come to Cape Town. So I spent 4 days, in Johannesburg, and then I arrived in Cape Town. And I remember I was staying at the waterfront, and I just couldn't believe its beauty. Now, remember, I hadn't seen anything. I'd just gone from the airport to the waterfront. But it was at that, even then, was just spectacularly beautiful, what I saw with the mountains. And I was literally in Cape Town for, I would say, less than an hour. And I went to the concierge and I said, do you have an estate agent?
Just like that?
Just like that. And that's really my story with South Africa.
Wow.
And that's how it began. So they got me an estate agent. I started to look for properties. But at that time, just a holiday home.
Yes.
I wasn't looking to move to South Africa or Cape Town. And on that trip, I didn't quite find what I liked. But then, of course, I got to see most of Cape Town, and I just completely fell in love with the city. Came back, found a home in Camps Bay, which you're very familiar with. And but as I said, it was a holiday home. But what was amazing, and my wife visited the next year. What was amazing about it was we started spending a lot of our holidays instead of going to the States, we started coming to South Africa. And so my third child, I suggested to my wife that we have our third child in South Africa since we had a home here. Again, I hadn't really thought about moving to South Africa. And so we did have our third child, India, here in South Africa. And an interesting thing happened. So I got invited to watch the State of the Nation address. In February of 2005. My third daughter had just been born. And we had made friends already. And they said, well, why don't you come see President Mbeki speak? And so I went and I watched him give this most incredible speech. I think till today, probably one of the best speeches I've ever heard a leader give. And that was the first time I thought, you know what? It might be interesting to live here.
That was a switch.
That was a switch. So it was a light bulb moment for me.
Interesting.
And
just from a speech from the leader and listening to him.
Just listening to Thabo Mbeki, President Thabo Mbeki speak. And so I came back and had the conversation with my wife, but we were already quite settled in Lagos. And, you know, my wife, as you know, is not from Nigeria. She's from the US. And while it wasn't a very long adjustment to adjust to Nigeria, she was enjoying living in Lagos.
So now another move.
Now another move. You know?
I was like, where are you taking me? I just said.
So I had that conversation, and she wasn't quite very enthusiastic. She had already, you know, family
settled,
was already in Lagos. She was familiar with Lagos. She was happy being in Lagos. And so I said, well, just think about it. And we did. And of course, as you know, a fourth child was now in the offing and was born in South Africa again in 2007. And I think that's when we made the decision.
This is home.
This is, so we decided to move here. But you know, at that time I was still in my early 40s, too young to retire for sure. So what do I do now? I had spent already 20 years in the LPG space. I had a fairly successful LPG business. And so but what I did find in 2007, I could see that there were gaps in the LPG market. There were shortages of LPG constantly in South Africa, which was quite ironic because Nigeria was exporting LPG. And some of that exports, I exported some of that LPG out of Nigeria. And we would literally pass the Cape of Good Hope all the way to China, and there would be no LPG in South Africa. So clearly that was a gap. And so I thought it would be an opportunity to build an import terminal in a place called Saldanha. We looked at Cape Town, but we were advised to build it in Saldanha. So in 2007, I started Avedia Energy in South Africa. And we started building the facility in 2012, let's say. And it completed it in 2017. And it became, so it's an import terminal for LPG and to fill in the gap for the constant shortages. So we've got an LPG business in
South
Africa, in the Western Cape. And
well done. Kudos to you. Tell you what, we'll stop right there because there's still more I want to find out in terms of how you got into business. So, guys, we'll be right back. My brother Atose, what a journey, and what I think you were caught up for being an entrepreneur, even from your parents, like you said, and your journey now into running Avedia Energy here in South Africa, seeing the gap and taking the opportunity, coming from Nigeria to South Africa, being part of those who are, adding value, to the economy of South Africa. How or why, was it a natural thing for you to get into business, or this is something that you had dreamed about, being a business person and an entrepreneur?
I think certainly my family background had a lot to do with.
What position are you in the family, by the way?
So I'm the first.
Oh, you're the first child. Okay. Right, sorry.
So business was always a part of, my father started the gas business when I was 3 years old.
Okay.
So I grew up in
that
business.
environment,
So
in the business.
And prior to that, I've had grandfather, great grandfather, who was quite a very successful businessman,
right,
on my mother's side. So I think business was always a part of the family. It was a natural thing to go into. Even though my father is a trained engineer, he's really a businessman. So we always had conversations, and I remember having mock board meetings with my siblings.
Really?
We would sit around the dining table and pretend that we had we were a board of directors.
Oh, okay. Are you? So, well, you're always a chairman.
I was always a chairman. Okay. And so that was so it was certainly it was natural that I went into business. So I think that's really easy.
So what kind of challenges, for you have you faced? Because you are a successful, business person. I know very well. You've done very well for yourself and making us proud, as a Nigerian in South Africa. What kind of challenges? Because I'm sure it's not been totally smooth sailing. There will be challenges along the way. What challenges have you encountered, and how have you managed, to overcome them?
I think I think most young entrepreneurs, and the challenge that I faced as a young entrepreneur was that, there's a difference between being an entrepreneur and being a manager.
True.
And I think, unfortunately, you don't realize that till you have problems in the business, right? And so you can be very talented as an entrepreneur, and you're able to create something from nothing. But managing that takes different sets of skills.
Correct.
And I think that's where many young entrepreneurs, including myself, have run into some trouble. But of course, as you grow and you build your business, the thing is, it's very expensive school fees to learn how to be a good manager. And I think that's some of the issues young entrepreneurs like myself faced. So there've been challenges, of course. Just having to operate on the continent it throws up all kinds of challenges, opportunities, of course, but also challenges. And so we've obviously had to adapt to those challenges.
Right.
But certainly I wouldn't trade it in for anything else. I mean,
I can imagine. Yeah. So now, in terms of focusing on the business side, what would you say makes a business work? What would you say, and what makes a good idea to fail? Because sometimes people come up with the best of ideas and it still fail. And what tips can you give, I know we could have a program on this topic alone, but I just want you to give nugget bit of, business tips to anyone, thinking of starting up in business, especially our young people or anyone already in business.
I think one of the key things about being successful or a successful entrepreneur is knowing your business. Right. That is, knowing the product or the service you want to deliver. Oftentimes people have dreams, but dreams are not actually tangible in the sense that, there's a whole process that has to happen between a dream and a reality.
Correct.
And not enough. Sometimes, if you, for example, if you want to, you want to start a restaurant, the fact that you're a good chef may not make you a good restaurant owner.
Correct.
So if you want to become a good restaurant owner, understand what it takes to be a good restaurant owner. And that means learning about what it is to run a restaurant. You know, you may know a lot about cooking, but very little about how to run a restaurant. So I think key to being a successful engineer is spending time to learn about the particular business you want to go into.
Okay.
That there's no substitute for that.
Right.
Not saying that you would learn everything. Obviously, as you go along, you know, you continue to learn. But it's important you learn as much as you can. I think also tapping into available resources. I think it's absolutely key, and partners, if you find the right partners. But resources, and when I talk about resources, I'm not just talking about financial resources.
No, because sometimes most people think it's only about money, but you know, there are other, please do share.
Absolutely. So it's not just financial resources. There are a lot of resources that are available to young people that help in building a business. It could be finding a mentor, for example, as a sounding board, for example, you know, things like that. There's no substitute for hard work. So if you're going to be an entrepreneur, be ready to stay up at night.
Yeah. Those sleepless nights. Because that's a problem. A lot of young people sometimes, well, maybe I'm generalizing, sometimes think, yeah, okay, I want to start a business, and that means I have all the time in the world, you know, to do whatever I like. But not necessarily. So you should be ready to have those sleepless nights.
Absolutely. There will be sleepless nights. And you must defer gratification.
Okay.
That's absolutely important. You know, a lot of young people...
I like that. Yeah, please.
You know, you want to drive a fancy car, but you also want to own a business.
Yeah.
Sometimes you can't reconcile both. Yeah. And so you might have a friend that has a very fancy car, but you want to start a business. Maybe defer that fancy car for as long as you can, you know, and build your business. Yeah. I think oftentimes, especially in today's, I think, and I certainly don't want to be...
Where people want instant gratification.
Absolutely, I don't want to be that middle-aged man talking about young people today.
I know, right?
There are many talented young people. But I think with social media, it has made instant gratification even more prevalent than when we grew up. Yeah. And so people want the nice cars, the nice houses, you know, the nice holidays today.
Yes. And not ready to do the hard work.
Yes, exactly. So it's important that you know, don't use your capital to buy a car. Instead, use your profits to buy that car. But invest most of that profits in your business.
Chuck me knuckle, as we say. I hope you're hearing, people. There you go. Now, let me now go back to you now as an individual. So what are some of the personal qualities that are essential, you know, to have as an entrepreneur, which I believe you have, and that has helped you being a good leader, being a good entrepreneur? What are those personal qualities that, you know, are needed? And what motivates you? What keeps you going?
Yeah. So I think, you know, I can't speak for all entrepreneurs, obviously. I think people have different, you know, motivations. Mine has always been trying to create something that is beyond me.
Right.
You know, whether it's a product, whether it's a service. And I think one of the things that empathy is a key quality that is required to be a successful entrepreneur.
Right.
Of course, entrepreneurs are typically viewed in many societies as this hard business people, but most entrepreneurs are actually quite empathetic. Remember, they're creating businesses that have to pay people, that in fact transform people's lives.
Exactly.
So there has to be empathy in that. And any entrepreneur would tell you that when there's a downturn in the business, the most difficult decision they have to make is letting people go. Yeah. And so empathy is key to that process or that quality you require. I think hard work. There's no substitute for hard work. You're not going to be able to wing it. You're going to have to wake up early. If you want to sleep in, look for something else to do.
Because the world will be going tick while you're sleeping in. Unless you've made one of those business, or it's a business that you can be sleeping and making your money and whatever, but have to work.
Most people don't have that opportunity to have passive income like that.
Passive income. That's what the word I was looking for.
So if you want to create a business that creates active income, you need to wake up before everybody else. So there's no substitute for hard work.
You mentioned earlier there when we were talking about when you were giving the tips on business that it would be good for you to find a mentor. Did you have a mentor yourself, or do you have role models, people that have helped you in your journey as an entrepreneur? Apart from your dad, was your natural mentor. Did you have any others?
Yeah, so look, my dad is clearly the natural mentor for me. Obviously watching him growing up and seeing how focused he was. So that's certainly my dad. But growing up also I had others, and when I started business, I wanted to go into business, and I think it's important to mention one mentor that I never met. I spoke to, but never had the opportunity to meet him. And his name was Reginald Lewis. So he was an African American entrepreneur. He, in fact, did the first first African American to do a first $1 billion deal in the States, and that was in the early 1980s, late 1980s. And those who are interested in reading up about him, he has an autobiography out. That would be an interesting read, I think, for most entrepreneurs. But I had spoken to him, and he was really, I think, a role model for me.
Right.
Other mentors were in Nigeria, of course, when I came back, and people who gave me opportunities.
Okay.
There's no such thing as a self-made man. People always use the term self-made man or self-made woman. Nobody's self-made. There are always people who are involved in creating that success.
Right.
So I'm certainly not a self-made man.
So you had other people that had invested in you in various forms. Some you've never met, like you said. Wow.
So my mom, for example, is still an avid reader, and introduced all of us to reading, and so that certainly has helped me in my own career path. Always trying to learn and read, and so I guess to my point that it takes an entire community to create a successful entrepreneur.
Yeah. Wow. You have been so, I don't know what to use, and I'm just going to ask this as, two things which are related but not related. So do you mentor anybody at the moment?
I do.
Okay.
So not as many people as I would like to, obviously.
Because we're going to be back. That's what I'm asking. Because we are always looking for mentors, for our young people here.
Absolutely.
And formally, informally, and it depends on what you want to do. And each time we're doing this, I realized that more people need to, like what you're saying. You never met this young, man, but speaking to him had a big influence on your life.
Absolutely.
So, my second one, would any of your children, are they thinking of going into business as well? Or you haven't had that talk yet?
Yeah, so I think my approach with my kids have been slightly different from my parents, my father's approach with myself, right? So,
because things have changed.
Things have changed
from way back.
So I haven't been prescriptive about what they study or what career paths they want.
Yeah.
I do think that they are all sort of attracted to business. My first daughter has just graduated from NYU, and she's certainly working for a bank now, and she's clearly has that entrepreneurial spirit in her. I see that. So. But whatever parts they
take,
as long as they work hard and they're successful, it's fine.
Because why I'm saying that as well is, and especially for us in this part of Africa, be it West or Southern Africa, and learning from our brothers and sisters from Asia, and whereby there's a succession plan most of the time for their business. Because I saw that with my parents, where my father is a lawyer and he wanted to force me to study to become a lawyer, and I rebelled. I now see it as rebelling, which I now regret, that I didn't do it. But, when he had to retire last year, well, semi-retired, he's still working again, even though we're trying to stop him. I felt for him because none of his children want to really take up, what is built and everything, and same thing with my mom. So I'm thinking we need to, even if our children don't go that path, maybe just to have a kind of a plan, for them. I don't know, but I just feel there needs to be more done, in that area in terms of succession planning.
I think my advice to parents is don't try and live for your children. Don't assume your children are going to be interested in your business. And so if you do build a business, certainly don't build that business for the kids.
Exactly. Exactly. Exactly.
Build a business for the community. And as much as you can, encourage professional management. And that really should be a succession plan. There should never be a succession plan in place that replaces merit over a last, and where you take the last name of somebody as opposed to merit. So,
I like that.
So certainly if I had a child who was interested in my business and enthusiastic about it, I would hope that the decision for that child to become a future CEO of that company will be based on merit, not the fact that they've got the same last name as myself. So I think
I agree.
Yeah,
that's
I think parents should really just concentrate on creating a business that they could bequeath to the community. Now
let's go a little bit now to South Africa, Nigeria, and Africa as a continent. We're all aware of all the issues and challenges from poverty, unemployment, gender-based violence. We could go on, infrastructure issues and so on that we have in this country. South Africa never used to be that bad, but it seems, sorry my South African brothers and sisters, but we're going that way now in South Africa. What do you think could be solutions to addressing any of this, from your view? What's anything, be it poverty, unemployment, I don't know. I'm rather, but like you said, challenges is about, it creates opportunities. So why are we not taking opportunities from the challenges we seem to be facing that never go away? What are some of the solutions that you can share with us on any particular challenge?
Look, there's certainly challenges on the continent. I take a slightly different view from the prevailing view you find now in the media that Africa isn't doing well. Of course, I've been in business 30 years. So I've been in business on the continent for nearly 30 years. And, in 1990, when I joined my father's company, there were less than 2 democracies in Africa. There were 54 countries in Africa at that time, 53, 2 democracies. Every other government was somewhat a dictatorship, including Nigeria. And of course, South Africa was under the apartheid regime. Today, I think out of 54 countries, there might be 2 or 3 dictatorships, if any. So just from a governance point of view, in 30 years, it's been tremendous. And if you look at the statistics on Africa, Africa has reduced poverty by nearly 30%. So many African countries 30 years ago were looking at poverty rates of, upwards of 85%. In many countries, they've reduced those poverty rates to below 50%. Ghana is a typical example.
Yeah.
Ghana has become a middle-income country with poverty rates. Of course, poverty rates of 40-50% is still too high, clearly.
Yeah.
But it's certainly a long way from where we're coming from.
Were.
Now, clearly, there are countries that are contributing to dragging the continent down. Unfortunately, one of those is, of course, Nigeria and Congo. And so those poverty rates continue to be persistent. But the rest of Africa can do better. But there's been tremendous improvement. Even South Africa. People talk about South Africa, and I say, look, 30 years ago, poverty rates in South Africa were upwards of 70-80%. That has been cut down. If you look at the number of just black people brought out of poverty into the middle class, black families, 4 or 5 million. Look at housing provided, almost 3 million houses, RDP houses provided in 24 years. Still a lot to be done. But I see the African situation as a glass half full rather than half empty.
Okay.
But to discuss the issues around, some of the violence we see, especially around gender-based violence, a lot of this is due to poverty.
Yeah.
And without jobs, people will be poor.
Yeah.
And so the conversation African governments now have to have is how do we get our people, employment should be a national security issue.
Yeah.
Not the army.
Yeah.
You should have, the main focus of any national government should be how do we create jobs?
Yeah.
Especially for a continent where half of its population, in some cases, below age 25. So how do we deal with issues around jobs? I've got some ideas on that. I won't bore you with that, but
no, share. Do share. No, I want to hear it because this is important. Please do share.
Well, I think, the idea. Look, I think unfortunately we've bought into an economic model on the continent where we essentially produced resources for the rest of the world and imported essentially manufactured goods. That is untenable. It won't work over the long term. So we've got to come to a decision as to what we do with our resources. How do we beneficiate those resources? How do we keep as much resources on the continent as we can? Understand that there are competing issues. So I've never run a government before, and I'm sure the problem with, governments say, well, we need to build hospitals, we need to build roads, we need money, so we need to export some of these resources. But again, that's what I was talking about earlier in dealing with people's, deferred gratification, right? So, some of these, we should concentrate on the future infrastructure in South Africa will be built through taxation. If your people are gainfully and fully employed, you can tax them adequately to create this new infrastructure you need. Trying to build infrastructure through just resources in a continent of nearly 1 billion people is simply untenable. Yeah,
it is. It is. We'll probably need to have a part 2, part 3 at some point because there's so much, that I really, really want to ask and for you to share. But one of the things I want to go back to your root of being a Nigerian. What drives you as a Nigerian? What are you passionate most about being a Nigerian in South Africa?
Look, I think one of the things I've taken out of being a Nigerian, Nigerians are very entrepreneurial. I think,
Yep.
And we, at least when growing up, education was always a central part of most families. There is always and family is quite central to what we do in Nigeria. And I think that's been hugely beneficial to myself. I think that's what I take away from being in Nigeria.
And I think that's one of the biggest thing, and for me here, where we spoke earlier on about creating jobs and employment being, like you put it, should be a national security issue. But one of the things I'm finding out with the work we do in schools and communities is a lot of our young ones here, especially the Black, colored community, are brought up, with the mindset that the only way they can work is to work for somebody, is to work to have a CV to take to someone, as opposed to, okay, I've got the education, now I can start business, I can be creating jobs. The mindset shift hasn't happened yet. And what you're saying is, most Nigerians have the entrepreneurial kind of mindset already because you have parents or other generations or uncles and families who have done that. How can we help, what else can be done to help the young ones here to shift into, okay, you can create jobs. You live in Kalija or you live in Langa, but maybe there's a need here. You can turn that into an opportunity for you to run a business. Although saying that is growing, and I go into the township, I see car wash business, I see people selling meat on the road, like the way we have it in Nigeria. So in the last 10 years, it wasn't that, but it's changing. So, but what else can be done to have that, way of where young people can think, that way?
So I think one cannot really speak one cannot divorce South Africa's legacy issue.
No, not at all. Yeah,
and
it's a big part.
So the South Africa's legacy issue is a huge part of why certain things happen.
Correct.
But as you said, it's changing. And why is it changing? Ironically, it's changing because people can't find jobs.
Yeah.
Part of why Nigerians are so entrepreneurial is also because of a failure.
Yeah, exactly.
It also has been a failure of government in providing decent jobs for Nigerians. So most Nigerians say, well, I'm never going to get a decent job, so I might as well hustle.
Yes.
And that's what's created that entrepreneurial spirit. So there's a fine balance. We certainly don't want to create a hustler's paradise in South Africa, where everybody just wants to sell everything. And there's nothing wrong with people wanting to go and work and either gain the experience. Or even spend a career. And you can be entrepreneur.
I mean, entrepreneur within the organization that you're working with.
Or spend a career in that organization. Absolutely.
Yeah.
Certainly there's a fine balance. And I suspect that as time goes on, we would find a crop of South Africans, black, colored, whatever, who will become hyper entrepreneurial, and we're seeing that. We're seeing more young people saying, look, I don't want to stay in an organization for 30 years. I have a passion for this and I want to pursue that. Technology would help drive that, obviously.
True.
So I'm quite optimistic in that regard.
Same here. Okay. Wow. I could go on, but I know we have to stop now, and it's been an honor and a privilege, and it's been insightful, learning and hearing your story, you sharing your story with us. And thank you for all you're doing, for putting back in the community, providing jobs, creating, employment for people. What you're doing, I'm sure I don't even know half of it, to be honest. And I know you're going to start your Avedia Foods next in 2022. Can 2022. You, before I finish, can you talk about that one? Because I'm always fascinated about food. So what's that about? So
Avedia Foods was essentially one of the things I really missed when I moved to South Africa was Nigerian food. As you know, when Nigerians were like Chinese people, we always have to have our food. We
can't do without our food.
We can't do without our food. So we must have our food wherever. If we're in Iceland, we must have our food. So I thought, well, why don't we just have our food already ready to eat, ready made and ready to eat? And that's really the concept behind Avedia Foods.
Okay, well, we'll be back to come and see how that will start cooking when it's launched in 2022, you said?
Yes.
Okay, can't wait. So what I want you to do now in closing is for you to please just speak to our viewers out there on anything you want to share with them, anything you want to say, particularly the young people. So if you could please just share.
I think what I'd like to share is the narrative that, first of all, to say young people on the continent are the luckiest generation. People between age 10 and 35, I think, are the luckiest generation of Africans. Think about what your parents and grandparents had to go through. I mean, I see some young black people in South Africa whose grandparents cannot imagine the lives these young people live and lead, working as professionals. So certainly the world is a much better place for Africans than it's ever been, or at least has been in hundreds of years. So I think if you take that, you realize that, well, there's a lot of hope. And so my parting comment would be that to respect where you're coming from, there is a tradition, and to build on, that tradition, to always try and give back to the community. I think that's, my parting comment.
Thank you, Mr. We should call you Chief now, eh?
No, not Chief.
Why not? You're from Ishan. I'm sure you're probably a chief, and you just don't want us to recognize that because it translates to other things. But no, thank you so much. There's so much, for me personally that I've taken away, knowing your business, deferred gratification. You made a comment, specifically, I like that one, desire meeting opportunity. And I think that's one thing that, people need to have. And wow, there's just so much, I can't even wrap it up. So there's so much, you need to play this and play and play and play again, to learn from it. So wishing you all the very best.
Thank you.
Would you have us back?
Of course.
Because there are other specific things we'll want to talk about. This one is a special series, just showcasing Nigerians living in South Africa and how they're contributing, to the economy and to, whatever is happening in here to celebrate the Independence Day. So thank you and wishing you all the best. We will definitely be on your door for mentors because we're always looking for mentors. And but thank you.
Thank you very much.
Wishing you all the very best.
Thank you. Appreciate it. Thank you.
Well, guys, that's all we've got for you today on Impact Africa. Till next time, this is Mama K saying stay safe. But you've heard from our brother here, and I hope you've been inspired, by his story, especially our young people. There's a lot that we can do to make a difference wherever you do. Always remember where you come from, and there's a lot you can put back in. So defer gratification. Yes, I need to keep saying that. You can get there. Nothing is impossible. So wishing you all the best. Until next time, stay safe, stay blessed. Love you all. God bless.